So we're talking about this guy, and this guy, and this guy, and this guy too. I can hear the pitchforks already. I wanted to start this off with a grand statement about creativity and what really makes an idea iconic. I think creators of all mediums know how difficult it is to be able to find inspiration and transmute it effectively for new audiences. We all have movies, songs, or even art pieces that we love, works that we want to share with the world, either just to put those references on display, or because it snatched you by the throat and forced you to bring your vision to light. Now, walking that fine line is hard, but it's what we're all here for. Seeing the ways old ideas inspire the new is a magical thing. It's especially magical in that moment you realize it's being done right in front of your eyes. But this isn't entirely a video about art and inspiration. It's also about influence and pop culture, and it's about the constraints of entertainment media in the US. I'm not here to make a claim on whether this is objectively good or bad representation. I just wanted to know what happens when inspiration comes in the form of an intersectional or cultural identity.
These niggas. I cried laughing when I
Yeah,
you know what I mean? like, we need to stay away from these niggas.
Part of the inspiration for this video came from this tweet right here that talks about black cartoon characters in the late 90s and early 2000s. And before you ask, no, I'm not necessarily addressing what this person was saying because this person wasn't making a whole lot of sense, but from the characters listed and presented, it triggered something. As a kid, I was a little confused by the lack of latitude in terms of character archetypes in animation. I'm thankful that today we have so much more representation when it comes to cartoon characters. We've gotten to the point where we can see so many main characters and supporting characters that are black but aren't only characterized by their hairstyles or their exaggerated swagger. Are y'all still referencing that? Yeah, I'm not gonna let that die. TV shows, just like any piece of art or entertainment, are created through a process of regurgitation, and that forces elements like representation to be colored by the era that was consumed prior to it. Today, you might hope that the necessary writers and creatives are on board to be able to pull from aspects of their lives to inform the creation of these new black characters. But back then, it was kind of hard for them to do that because, there wasn't any black people there. As syndicated cartoons continued to take off in the early 90s, there was already a social push to try and be more diverse in the makeup of characters presented on screen. Although there were many reasons, such as the adjusting climate post-civil rights, that contributed to this push, I assume that it was tied to the boom of cable TV in the early 80s that made it a lot more lucrative for production companies to make TV with broader audience appeal. Not necessarily for the black and brown viewers, they didn't care about them, but for the liberal-ish white viewers who definitely don't even see color. I would have loved to talk about TV censorship and how syndication became a form of redlining, but I think that's a conversation for another day. In continuation of that appeal problem, cartoon writers looked to sitcoms to try and walk that all ages tightrope and supplement their knowledge, lack of knowledge of black and brown people. And through that, in the 1990s, we saw the birth of the black boy genius archetype.
Y'all got any cheese?
It's in the fridge.
Did I do that?
Family Matters was a
Was that
sitcom
Drake?
that premiered in 1989. It was a direct spin-off from the series Perfect Strangers, which isn't a surprise. The family tree of sitcoms in the 70s and 80s are ridiculous. It was produced by Thomas Miller, Robert L. Boyett, William Bickley, and Michael Warren. All four were the creators and producers of Perfect Strangers. The series focused on the Winslows, a middle-class African-American family living in the suburbs of Chicago. It tackled everyday issues like high school drama, peer pressure, and familial disputes. The show leaned on instilling moral values in the closing of pretty much every episode, just like most sitcoms of the era. And I don't say that lightly, these sitcoms are very much rinsing and repeating what every other sitcom was doing. In season 1, the show was just figuring itself out, whether it was going for more of a Cosby Show type affair or whether they would try something wackier. Revisiting this series almost 40 years after feels like a bit of culture shock. Obviously, this was before my time, but what was of my time were the reruns. For me, Family Matters came on sometime during the Nick at Night block on Nickelodeon. It aired from about 5 to 7 in
That's
the
about
morning,
right.
so on a regular weekday when I would get ready for school and maybe eat breakfast before heading out, Carl Winslow would be on the screen. The back half of season 1 is where the show finally finds its footing and starts to pull away from being labeled the bargain brand Cosby Show. The series topped out in popularity as the 15th highest rated series in the US in 1990, with season 1 ending in that spring and season 2 premiering that fall. And it was season 2 that launched Family Matters into the homes of every American family in the country.
I want a bike. What do you want, Judy? A pony. The kid's got potential.
Even though there had been black sitcoms before Family Matters, series like The Cosby Show focused on presenting black families in a higher middle-class look, trying to upend stereotypes. By utilizing its bootstrapisms and conservative messaging, the show was able to become one of the most successful series of the 1980s. Prior to that, series like The Good Times were determined in humanizing black families that were living on the edges of poverty.
I dreamt I was chasing this chick, and her father was chasing me, and the muggers was chasing him, and the police was chasing the muggers, sort of like a ghetto marathon.
Family Matters was one of the first series to squarely present a working-class black family. It featured a blue-collar, two-parent household with both parents having worked as police officers, although Harriet, the mom, left the force way back in Perfect Strangers. Now again, I was not alive in the 1980s, but I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that this isn't what the homes of black kids living off one parent's income look like in Chicago. But I still think the producers were aiming at showing something a little more relatable than the Huxtables or the Jeffersons. At the time, black sitcoms had the intentions of every other sitcom, to reinforce conservative values and make people laugh. But after The Cosby Show became the TV darling in the mid to late 80s, black sitcoms were in vogue. As a result, we got an era of television that tried to destigmatize black families and showed America the type of blackness that they can see themselves in. And trust me, I get the irony in that statement.
Yo, Wheeler, catch.
How you like your new piece, man?
And from there, we got to see a certain supporting character that took America by storm when he was introduced in season 1.
Yes, she's getting ready now. You get that. I've got to go up and help Rachel.
Hi, Mr. Winslow. I'm Steve Urkel.
Yet, it is this super nerd character that has elevated Family Matters from little more than a moderately successful Friday night bridge between two established programs, Full House and Perfect Strangers, to a bona fide hit. Family Matters is the most popular show in its 8:30 p.m. time period, regularly snaring 25% of the available TV viewers. As the ratings increased, so did Urkel's screen time. Now, by producer's mandate, every script must contain at least a little bit of Urkel. The same accidental lightning that has struck this creative team before on a much larger scale. In 1970, Tom Miller teamed up with Gary Marshall and Edward Milkus to create Happy Days for Paramount. William Bickley and Michael Warren were on the writing staff. Although the 50s comedy originally focused on Ron Howard as Richie Cunningham, Henry Winkler's leather jacket college dropout, Arthur Fonzarelli soon stole the show. That's why producers of family shows usually create 3 or 4 kid roles. Warren said, "It is in hopes that one of them will catch on. In Happy Days, that kid was the Fonz."
Urkel was a phenomenon. Played to perfection by the charismatic Jaleel White, he walked funny, he talked funny, and he demanded your attention whenever he was on screen. Steve Urkel made his first appearance on Family Matters in episode 12 as Laura is preparing for her first school dance and she needs to find a date. Halfway through the episode, Urkel is presented as the weird kid in school and Laura's last result. As the story goes, Urkel was only meant to be an extra, but this episode did so well, the writers were excited and ready to bring the character back for more episodes. It's funny enough, but seeing as Urkel was introduced at the midway point of the first season, it looked like the Family Matters team was still trying to find its groove. Once they found Urkel, they knew they hit gold. Today, when you go and watch Family Matters on streaming, it's available through Disney Plus and Hulu. When you watch season 1, you'll notice that Urkel makes a few random appearances in the beginnings of episodes 7 and 8, but that isn't how it always was. After they decided that Urkel would be brought back for more episodes during season 1, the studio decided to try and seed Steve Urkel into the earlier episodes to make it a more seamless transition. So the original promotional intros for a couple of the earlier episodes were replaced with newer ones of Urkel bothering the Winslow household. As the seasons passed, Urkel became more and more of a focal point of the show. At first, the character's bit was just his social awkwardness, the weird things he did like eating mice or bathing with a duck, but eventually it transformed into the sci-fi world. Steve would invent a bunch of different junkyard gadgets that would do everything from creating an adjustable TV stand to a full-on cloning machine. The character was pretty much limitless.
Kid his age still using bath toys.
Come on, Mr. Quackers. Wow. Good night.
The show ran for 9 total seasons, and with each season, the show became less and less about the Winslows and more about Urkel. It still featured the trademark lessons at the end of the episode, but the issues became more abstract and way less grounded. Reading reviews of the show towards the end from old and new reviewers, the show eventually reached its Urkel saturation point well before the series ended. I'm gonna be honest, I've only seen like a small handful of episodes past season 7.
You still going by that ridiculous moniker, original gangster dog? That's OGD to you, and I dropped the Urkel.
In spite of the era that it was created in, Family Matters still found ways to straddle the fence between decoratively black TV fodder and decent social commentary. The Good Cop, Bad Cop episode stands out as a major acknowledgement of racial bias and police brutality. The episode starts with Eddie trying to explain to his dad how he was just racially profiled and wrongfully stopped by the police before Carl insinuates that Eddie must have done something wrong.
Dad, we gotta talk.
Edward, what's the matter?
I got pulled over by the cops.
Did you get a ticket?
You're not gonna even hear me out?
No buts, Edward. I warned you. Now hand over your license.
Eddie, what was the ticket for?
I was on my way to a party in Burlington Heights. I was driving along, minding my own business, when the cops pulled me over.
Son, are you absolutely sure?
Then I asked what the problem was, and one of them told me to shut up. Then he made me get out of the car and lie face down.
That's unusual procedure. Unless you provoked it.
Dad, the only reason they pulled me over is because I was a black guy in a white neighborhood.
Carl, this is frightening.
If it happened.
Dad!
Well, son, you lied about your last speeding ticket.
Do you think I would lie about something like this?
Well, I don't know, but I'm gonna check it out.
I hope you do.
Don't worry, Edward, I will.
By the end of the episode, though, Carl reads the 2 officers that stopped his son for filth, even though Carl stopped just short of realizing the systemic nature of the issue, as well as his own role in continuing to uphold that system.
Just a second, Evans. You know, I really don't know how that badge stays on, because it's pinned to slime.
But still, episodes like Fight the Good Fight in Season 2 showed some of the ways that attitudes towards acknowledging Black history are capable of triggering ridicule and social retaliation.
Hey, check it out, man.
Okay, guys. Showtime's over. I have vital information to share with you. We're trying to get a Black history class here at school. It'll help us appreciate the past, thereby contributing to the present and preparing us for the future.
Sounds good to me. There you go, Mama.
Oh, thanks a lot, guys. Well, that was easy.
Hey, my lock is open. Oh my God.
Laura, what's wrong?
If you want Black history, go back to Africa.
The episode centers around Laura fighting to include a Black history section in the school's curriculum, and in the end, all the students are better for it. Yo, time is a flat circle.
Mr. Shimada, I've spoken to several teachers, and we would all welcome the opportunity to present a more balanced view of American history.
Laura, there is a school committee meeting next month. Maybe you could come and recommend that a Black history class be made part of the curriculum.
I'll be there.
It was a mixed bag, and by today's standard, it can't be held up to be as salient as it may have been in the 1990s. I just think that it's important to note that there was an effort made to be socially responsible when speaking to such a large audience, as well as some acknowledgement given towards what Black people were facing in real life.
Put your head on my shoulder.
Yeah, I mean, the rain may fall, but let us smile for your umbrella.
How'd you like an umbrella up your nose?
Sure, Fonz. Whatever.
Before there was Urkel, there was Potsy from Happy Days. Patsy was one of the first iterations of Nerds to be regularly broadcasted on syndicated television. Patsy was a bit of a square, but it was strongly accentuated by his friendships with Ralph and the Fonz. I think on his own, he was just a goofy goober and not necessarily as insufferable as Urkel. He was always ready to sing a song and brought a lot of heart and sincerity to the series. I like to consider Patsy as the nexus point for this type of character. Don't get me wrong, there were earlier or even more enigmatic examples of nerdy characters in pop culture at the time. For instance, Pee Wee Herman's Pee-wee's Big Adventure definitely comes to mind, and especially 1984's Hollywood blockbuster, Revenge of the Nerds. Patsy differs from those before him simply because he didn't solely exist as a vehicle for cringe comedy, or as a way to put nerdy guys beating up jock stories on screen. As the series went on, Patsy fell further into the background as his character went from affable goof to painfully dull punching bag.
Now the stance.
Skeeter.
It's him! Screech, can we sit with you?
Well, I guess so, if we can find a table for 18.
Screech Mania.
No, his name was
Over
Screech.
Bayside like a bad rash. I don't get it. What did they see in him?
After Patsy came Screech Powers, who you might know from Saved by the Bell, but the character really premiered in Good Morning Miss Bliss, Saved by the Bell's short-lived predecessor. Screech was another step closer to Urkel. All the characters of Bayside High would agree that Screech Powers was an oddball. But he was also a legit genius who invented his own robot and could figure out how to work pretty much any machine. Although he was often the butt of the cast's jokes, his role on the series was as Zach Morrison's clumsy sidekick. He was still less bombastic than Steve, but he had a similar innocence that made him just as charming as Patsy. After sifting through producers and actors' accounts of the conveyor belt that was primetime television, I was a little less than surprised to see that there were some connective tissue behind the scenes. Most notably, Happy Days was produced by the exact same team that put together Family Matters. But also, Jaleel White would appear on the Good Morning Miss Bliss pilot 2 years before getting the opportunity to play Steve Urkel. While both Patsy and Screech fit the bill, neither of them carried the torch as far in regards to the iconography of the nerd as Steve. Some characters wear their Urkel influence in an overt way, while most just seem to pull from the essence of what made Urkel and his predecessors work. But make no mistake, Steve Urkel is the touchstone for many memorable nerdy characters to date.
So I can even explain why Steve Urkel worked.
Mm-hmm.
Steve loved cheese, poker. He played the accordion.
Did he eat mice?
He did. Yeah, he ate mice. But bottom
Yeah,
line is
weird.
that everything about the
He
kid.
was a weird black guy.
Yeah, everything about him was white and weird.
Yes.
So it made him as a character easy to write for the writers. They were excited now. Like, they were hyped now. They were like, oh, finally.
Blurs didn't exist in the mainstream. There was no
Finally, we got something we can write for.
Right.
And then just, you know.
We're doomed. But don't worry, Urkel. Before they eat our skin, I'll make these monsters pay. That's what Hostile Gutto does.
My name's Irwin, yo!
What?
I said my name's Irwin, not Urkel or Irving or Juanita! I was even your sidekick once on Billy and Mandy. Why don't you remember me, yo?
My memory is not what it used to be.
When I look at more modern examples of the black nerd archetype, there are so many to choose from. Taking a look at a character like Irwin from The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, I see how that first iteration of the concept shaped how writers approached writing this type of character. They knew there was comedy in writing a cowardly lover boy who thought he was the coolest thing ever. My issue appears when the only supporting character that happens to be black is also used as a goofy parody of black culture. It's the racialization of a character that isn't written with any of the social context for these jokes to be relevant. There's just like a certain amorphous blackness ascribed to the character.
Oh, goodness, someone please open a window and vent this nastiness out. Dude!
It's not me, yo! Yo, Billy, check it out! How's this for hip-hop, yo? Uh-oh, 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 uh-oh. The CIA is on to us! Run, girls! You ain't pinning Jack on me, yo!
No! Let him go. He seems to
totally forgotten this classroom is on the 3rd floor.
At this point now, it's not even a defining character trait, and it's
Hey
nowhere near
Google.
static. Craig of the Creek has multiple nerdy black characters.
We're gonna be right back.